Yo, what up? Welcome to Free Refills Podcast, where we come together as youth leaders to discuss the realities of leading in youth ministry. Our hope is that you leave refilled, refueled, and re-energized to carry on in ministry. I'm your host, Boss, coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nick.
How's it going?
I was kind of going fast. He's coming to you from Sparks, Nevada. How was that?
That's right.
That was good. Perfect.
Every time you learn a little better.
There it is. Each episode, we have a special guest join us, and today we have Jacob Eckeberger. Jacob, welcome.
Hey, y'all. Glad to be here.
Hey, Jacob, thanks for being with us. Before we jump into the conversation, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you located? Tell us about your family and how long you've been in ministry.
Yeah, so I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but I haven't been here long. I've only been here for about 3 years. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and so I got salsa in my veins, and it does not keep me warm in the winter up here. So I'm still trying to figure that stuff out.
Perfect.
And I'm married. I've been married for 16 years in June, and we've got 2 kids. Almost 2-year-old daughter who is like hilarious and already finding her voice, and then we've got a 5-year-old son / dinosaur who is not afraid to take on the world. So
That's incredible.
And I mean, I've been in ministry as a volunteer youth worker for the last 15 years, and I've worked vocationally in organizations that support youth workers. But I always feel like I've grown up in youth ministry because my dad was a youth pastor, and he's been a bivocational pastor now for a long time. And so I kind of, ever since I was a kid, and even in middle school, I would help out with elementary school. And as a high school kid, I would volunteer with middle school. And so I kind of came to know who I am in the world through youth ministry.
Yeah.
So it's been a part of my life for a long, long time.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, we're stoked to have you with us for this conversation. I'm excited as we get into the topic. Before we do that, Nick, you've got some questions lined up for the guest fun.
Well, actually, like when you explain that, like how you grew up in youth ministry, like I totally see that because I've met you off and on over the years at the Youth Specialties Conference. And for me, what sticks out about you to me is that you like genuinely care about people. And like for me, like just being a guy that goes to a conference and bumps into this guy, and I met him, and next thing I know, I get home and there's a Facebook ad from you. I'm like, guy. And then like as years went on, I'm like, you knew my name, and I'd see you once, and then I don't know if you know this, there was a time where I was going through hard stuff in my life, and you jumped on Facebook and just said, hey, you came to mind today. How can I pray for you? And to me, that was like, this guy doesn't know me, man. So your heart for youth ministry, your heart for youth workers is so evident to me in a little bit. I see you once a year kind of thing. So I just, when I heard that we were going to have you as the guest, I was like, yes, I love this guy. This is going to be awesome. So thanks, I was pumped, but it is Free Refills is the podcast name.
Yeah.
And so as you take a sip, our question is this, what is your soft drink of choice?
Oh, soft drink?
Or drink.
Yeah. I mean, I still rarely drink like sodas anymore, but like if I do a drink, it's usually like a Diet Coke or a Coke Zero if I can find it. But I feel like I got an IV drip of coffee that I just live off of. So, and I drink any and every type of coffee. And I have a terrible sense of taste. So I don't know the difference. Everyone's like, oh, you should buy it. It's from this region. I don't know. If it's in a cup and it's warm, I'll drink it. If it's not warm, I'll still drink it. It'll be fine. So I do really well with church coffee because the bar is really low.
That's hilarious. And I will say that when we ask people about their favorite soft drink, everybody jumps to like, oh, I don't know if I drink like carbonated stuff or like,
oh yeah.
Coke. But I'm like, soft drink is just like not alcohol. Like, 'cause it's not a hard drink, it's a soft drink. So
That's hilarious. I haven't thought about that before.
yeah, because I was like, because some people get kind of weirded out because they're like, oh, huh. And
That's
I'm like,
different. Well, the hard drinks are a different podcast.
right.
We can
That's
talk
a
about
different that's a different place, a different
Yeah.
type of ministry. And
We record
whatever.
that one after 5.
Yeah. But
there.
it's just funny, like you jump to that. So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up so that if anybody was like, he had to really think about what soft drinks he drinks. It's like,
hilarious.
no, you're all coffee all the time and not
Oh,
carbonated. I
Yeah.
resonate. Anyway, keep going. Keep asking questions.
Yeah. So this question was asked of me this last week, and it completely stumped. So good
Okay.
luck.
Okay.
But we talk about, like, often we ask, hey, what book are you in? But I'm going to twist that on you.
Okay.
If you had the ability to require high school students to read one book, what would that book be?
I'm trying to look at. I've got this like go-to book shelf up here that I go off of. For me, if it was like, I don't want a high school student to leave high school without reading this thing, it's honestly, it might be this book. It's Inside the Box by Drew Boyd and Jacob Goldenberg. And this is really like it's all about systemic inventive thinking. And the thing that I love about it is that it talks about, like, what is it that you have in front of you that you could use to solve a problem in a way you've never thought about solving it before. And when I think about this last year, the high school senior that I was mentoring that graduated and is now exploring online college, right?
Yeah.
When he was wanting to like go in person, like, so much about like my conversations with him were all about, like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what sort of direction do you want to go? And he would just say, well, I don't have much to go off of. Like, there's not much around me, and everything that I want to do, it feels like I've got to have like 3 or 4 things that are outside of my wheelhouse or outside of my resources to be able to get. So I don't know. And I found myself in a lot of those conversations talking with him about how the stuff that's in front of us, a lot of times the way we currently have it configured and the way that we currently use it, sometimes we get into this like habit of assuming that's the only way to use it, or that's the only way to configure it. And this systemic inventive thinking approach allows you to kind of like break those assumptions and take those things apart and put them in its separate pieces, and then figure out creatively, well, what if instead of this block being here, what if it was here? Or what if it lived on its own and I invested in it in a different way? And I just think pouring that value back into the gifts and talents they already have, and not necessarily the only really limited ways they've seen them used, but like, say, helping them imagine there are so many uses for this, that passion that you have, or that creative skill, or that energy that you have. You don't see it, but there's a lot of different places that God can lead you if you follow that. And I feel like it would be something like that. This is a bit heady and a bit corporate feeling, like executives of companies read this stuff. And I feel like if there was, a lot of times when I'm reading books like that, I think if there was a youth ministry version of this,
Yeah,
it'd be incredible. And maybe there is, maybe it's already out there and somebody's published it and I just don't know about it. But
that's solid.
Yeah,
That's
Cool.
really good.
that was a good question.
Well, we'll drop that. We'll drop that in the notes so that if somebody's listening along or watching along, they're like, "What was that book?" Also, I saw Jacob is the title, and I was like, "Really? You're gonna plug yourself?" Like,
Jacob.
yeah. But that's not you. That's not your type of thing.
It's another Berg.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before we jump into the conversation, I have to address something. It's super lighthearted. The last conversation we had on our podcast, our guest John Brown challenged me to we had a conversation about chicken sandwiches, and we had a conversation, or it was one of the questions of Chick-fil-A spicy or Popeye's spicy. Well, I finally had the Popeye's spicy sandwich because I had never had it. And so he challenged me to go get it. A little bit of a story. I went to go get it one night and drove up to the drive-through. A little recording, a voice came on, said, "Do you want to try this?" And I said, "No, thank you." And I ordered, and there was nothing. And so then I drove around to the window. Nobody came to the window. It was during operating hours. I wasn't there after close. I was there when they were open, and no one came to the window. And I think they shut the restaurant down early or something. And so I couldn't get it. So I was like, great. So I went and got it today and had the Popeye's spicy sandwich. Here's my take on it real quick. They have a better spicy sandwich. Popeyes has a better spicy sandwich than Chick-fil-A.
Wow.
And the reason why is because of the thickness and the spice and just the whole package together. That's just the sandwich. That's not the customer service. That's not all the other options. It's just the sandwich. That's it. So they have a better spicy sandwich. I would pick Chick-fil-A still. If somebody said, "I'm going to get food, where do you want it?" I would go Chick-fil-A.
My question is, why is this the debate? There are so many better options to argue over. Like,
I don't know.
A spicy chicken sandwich is just a spicy chicken sandwich. It's not even like, I don't ever wake up going, "That's what I need today."
Yeah, sure,
like,
I get that.
Sushi,
yeah, and
let's go. I'll debate sushi all day long.
Right,
but
right. 100% ironic for us to be talking about this and mentioning this. And I thought this was great because it chalked us up for, we're going to talk about prioritizing our physical health. And here I am. I just downed a fast food chicken sandwich and we're debating about it. So anyway, our theme this month is about prioritizing our physical health in youth ministry. Now, it comes at a great time because we're in the Easter season, and this is a time where we as Christians, we all, and Christ followers, we all celebrate all things new. Jesus comes back, he resurrects, and we celebrate the fact that we have a new life. Well, we thought this would be a good time to talk about our physical health. We talked about our mental health a few months ago. We've talked about emotional and spiritual health along the way as well, but we haven't really talked about physical health. And the fact is, youth ministry can be tough to prioritize our physical health because we have things up against it. Twizzlers or red vines, whatever that's a whole nother debate we can talk about later. Late nights, pizza, Mountain Dew, energy drinks, all those things, none of that helps us in our physical health. So we asked Jacob to come in. He's not necessarily the guru in physical health, but in his own personal journey, he's an expert. And so he can share with us about his personal journey and what changed for him and why his physical health became a priority. So Jacob, that's why we brought you in. Thanks for joining us in this. To set us off and to start the conversation, maybe just give us a small synopsis of the moment or maybe the moments that led up to the moment where you were like, this was the time where I felt like something wasn't right and I needed to change. Share with us about that. That'll get us going in the conversation here today.
Totally, man. And I mean, kind of like leading up to that, honestly, a lot of my life, and when I would pursue health, I would say it was actually done in a really unhealthy way. It was focused on like hitting specific numbers on a scale or being within a BMI index and all that stuff. And so I do feel like it's important anytime we talk about health to talk about it from just a more holistic perspective than like, what does the scale say or what size clothes do we wear? Because that's just not realistic. And honestly, it sets all of us up for failure if that's the only thing we sum it up to. So for me, the turning point was honestly, it was about a little over 3.5 years ago. My family and we had just moved up to Minneapolis, and the organization I was working with at the time was going through a ton of change. And within that, I mean, we moved to a new city. There was a lot of change, a lot of like deep concern about like this job I moved up here for, is it going to be there next week? You know, like everything's in this tiny apartment or in a U-Haul, and what are we doing with our life, sort of thing. And I was in this season where I was searching for anything that would give me comfort. And I found it mostly in food and in honestly overindulging in alcohol and stuff like that. And for me, it was, there were several points where I started to realize like, this is not a healthy way to deal with this stress, but I don't know how else to do it. Like, I don't know how else to process it. And I, just because of who I am, anytime I'm faced with like a level of stress or a challenge, I just passionately take it on, and I figure out like, I'm gonna solve it on my own. I don't need other people's help in the process. And it wasn't until my wife Katie kind of set me down and had a come to Jesus conversation, and she just kind of told me to my face, like, you are not healthy, and the way I see it is that you are not healthy towards us as our family. You're not healthy towards yourself in the way that you're treating your body, in the way that you're talking about yourself. And so I don't know what you need to do, but you need to do something. And I mean, fortunately, she is a health coach and she's certified and all that stuff. So I just said, you know what? There's a lot of layers that I need to go to counseling for in this, but at the very minimum, I'm going to lean into like what I'm putting in my body. Because I know that if I can align myself nutritionally, if I can align the stuff that's going into my body first, then I might be able to think clearer. I might be able to have the energy to deal with this stress. And that's really what happened, is that it was this, for me, it was this tipping point of like, I can't afford to keep ignoring this stuff. Like, I have to deal with it. And I kind of didn't know where to start, other than maybe I need to eat differently. Maybe I need to like adjust my sleep patterns or whatever. And I just slowly started chipping away at it one at a time. And it was life changing for me.
Yeah. It's almost like when I just heard you talk about how like your wife, and for some people it's like, okay, well, I don't have a spouse in my house with me. But there was somebody that knew you through and through, loved you through and through, and just grabbed your face essentially and said, wake up.
Right.
Like, and this is affecting all of us. And that is a really good catalyst to change, where I think that's really strong and powerful. Good for her for finally stepping up and saying, hey, I care about you. So like, let's get this figured out. So you started to make a change, and it's never easy.
Right.
Anytime we ever see things online, we see things on TV, it's like, here it is. Here's the transformation picture. Here's all this. Right. We see we don't see the struggle. We don't feel the struggle. We don't know what people went through to get there. I mean, I don't know, maybe talk about those early days where you started in on it, like where you were like, is this worth it? Is this like, what am I doing to myself? Like,
right.
I don't know. I mean, what I don't want us to get into is necessarily like physical size of your body and all of that sort of stuff, because you said it's holistic. So there was a lot of things you were cleansing through, a lot of layers you were pulling back. Maybe that's it. Maybe here's my question. What was that first layer for you where you were like, this is what I'm starting with? You talked about putting stuff in your body. How did you determine that was the first thing?
Yeah. So for me, there was a big shift in thinking about health, and that I'd always thought about my pursuit of health was what I'm not able to do, meaning like a really restrictive approach. And I shifted my mindset into like, what do I want to fuel my body with, so that I can focus on the things that I'm now able to do with my body. Because I mean, again, growing up in the house of a youth pastor, I remember the earliest church that I remember my dad serving at. had a Taco Bell in the back of the parking lot. And his breakfast every morning, my dad's breakfast every morning, was a Snickers, a Pepsi. His lunch was Taco Bell. And so like for years. So, and my dad always jokes about like his, high blood pressure medicine, diabetes medicine. He wants to give it something to do, is what he says. So he'll just eat
Wow.
whatever he wants. And that's just his approach to life. And I started recognizing that if I keep up at this pace with what I'm doing, and kind of, for me, I was really careless with what I was putting in my body.
Sure.
If I wanted it, I ate it, I drank it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think about it. But the problem with approaching it from that way is that eventually, if you don't have someone like a spouse or a loved one to grab your face and say, hey, something's wrong, your body's going to do it for you. Because bodies are amazing things. They can bounce back from cancer. They can bounce back from COVID. They can bounce back from almost anything that we throw at it. But eventually, if we're not helping it along the way, it's gonna lay us down if we're not choosing to lay down. And so I was starting to think about, what do I want to be doing in ministry in 10 years? How do I want to be active with my kids in 10 years? What are the things I want to be able to do? And is it worth changing some things I'm doing now so that I can be able to do that? And for me, stuff just started to click into gear with that mindset. And I personally chose, there's a lot of different routes you can go. I chose a route that had like a very set nutrition plan. So I was like, part of that is because I needed to think less about what I was going to eat and just focus on knowing that it was going to be good for my body. And then also dealing with all of the other emotional, spiritual layers of unhealth that I needed to unpack. So I kind of needed to take that weight off of my shoulders so I could focus on the other things and through my junk there. And so I went that route, and it really kind of like helped me solidify that in the end, it's not about restrictions. It's not about what you're not able to do. It's all about what you can position your body to be able to do. And in the world of youth ministry, I mean, where food that's not healthy for you is the easiest, the cheapest to get. It doesn't affect kids' bodies the same way it affects 30, 40, 50-year-olds, right? So like when you find yourself in those situations, it can be hard. And I think that's why it's so challenging for so many people in ministry, is that the levels of stress are high. The resources, the ability to provide and find healthy food is pretty hard. And then also I mean, like you said, the lock-ins, the camps, all those times when you're tired, when you're irritable, you just want stuff to comfort you. And food is within easy reach, right? So it's a perfect storm of issues for youth pastors to be thinking about trying to maintain health in all the ways that you can. And to do it in a way that, honestly, boss, you can have a spicy chicken sandwich and not feel bad about it, right? And have no guilt associated with it. Like that's the thing, is that we've positioned food as the enemy, when really it's more about just like, it's a bystander in all of this. And we just got to make the right choice between, like, what do I want right now for my body? Is it this or that? And what will this or that do for my body when I need it to do in an hour or 3 days or 3 years or whatever?
I think one of the things that hit me that you were talking is, you had your wife have that conversation. That's not easy, right? Or you're saying your body's going to tell you, but we have to put ourselves in a position to hear from our bodies. Like for me, I'm starting this journey literally in the last 4 months, because I grew up as a swimmer and a water polo player, and I was active and I have high metabolism. And I'm like, I kind of laugh when I think about like the youth specialties conference, right? You can look around the room and there's really like 5 stereotypes of youth workers in that room that just repeat over and over again. It's like, oh, there's the skinny guys, and there's the lumberjack guys, and there's the, but I always was like, I'm the skinny youth pastor, and I'm fine, and I don't have to worry about that. And yes, I'm still wearing my middle school camp t-shirt from when I was a student, because I've never changed shirt sizes. And I had so much pride in that. But then my wife was pushing at me going, when's the last time you've gone to a doctor? And I told her, and yeah, I don't go because I don't need to. And none of my doctors ever looked at me because you're skinny, you're a swimmer. And when it hit me, it's been 15 years since I've swam competitively and just about as long since I've worked out. And I went to a new doctor and said, I need a full workup because I need to know, find out my cholesterol is through the roof. So like if you're out there and you don't have someone say anything, you're not going to a doctor like me because you just think things are fine, and you might be way off because I was. And I am trying to figure out where to start. That's where I am. I'm right now. I'm walking on a treadmill whenever I can.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So, and it's made a huge difference.
Yeah. And
so
go ahead.
My question off this would be, okay, so I'm walking on the treadmill. My goal originally was 5 miles a day. I'm up to close to 15 a day.
Nice.
And I'm finding once I get past a certain line, I'm like, oh, I can just keep going. Is what do you see with that? Like, what was that tipping point for you from where it went from difficult to, no, this is what it is now. And this is, I can keep going and I want to do more. Is that, did you find that with you or no?
Yeah. So I mean, I found it on two levels. One, like nutritionally, and then on the other side, like physically, with just challenges that I would put my body through. And nutritionally, it was all about like, growing up in Texas, if you didn't have Bluebell after your dinner, it wasn't a complete dinner. Bluebell ice cream, right?
Yep.
So like
makes sense.
I for a long time, and as crazy it was, like I had this mentality that I have to have dessert after dinner. Like I have to have this thing. Or like if I go to a burger place, I've got to get the like 2 patties. I got to get the extra large fry, like whatever it is. And I started to realize that like I could eat a little bit less, or I could like switch things up and like not have ice cream after every dinner, but maybe every few, or and then I even like started going more towards like trying to eat a less meat in my overall diet, where I used to always feel like I had to have one piece of meat in every meal, and now it's like one meal a day I'll have meat. And so it's all of this stuff mentally where I started to realize, once I peeled a little bit back and saw, oh, like I'm actually okay without that. Like I'm actually not hungry, or like I don't need that extra ice cream. I may want it, and it's totally fine to want it and then get it, but like I don't need it right now. So what's another way for me to think about it? And what's another way I can use that energy? So it happened nutritionally, and then physically, it also happened in like, as I was working on my nutrition, I started to have more energy physically. So I started to run, and I started to like, I originally set these goals for running a 7-minute mile, and I'd never done that in my life. And I eventually hit that. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do next? And then I started doing like CrossFit type stuff. And I started doing like exercises that freaked me out and that scared me. And I started actually really enjoying it. I started to push my body even more, and I was hitting all of these like goals on the physical side too. And so, like for me, it kind of happened in tandem. As I was like fueling my body in the right way, I was able to like feel an amount of energy, and also recover from really like intense workouts fairly quickly. And so I personally see there's a lot of interconnection between how you fuel your body and how you spend that energy. But at the same time, you got to start somewhere. And it's all about doing it consistently, because everybody who has something to sell in the health world will always say, this is the magic bullet. This is the thing everyone's been waiting for, whatever it is, whatever program it is. All of that can be a crack. But the reality is, you got to find something that you can just stick to, because consistency is the only thing that will work in health. And if you can stick to it and be consistent with it, it doesn't matter if it's how it compares to the person next to you or the person across the gym from you or whatever. Just do what you know you can do. And then every once in a while, try to challenge yourself a little bit and see
Mhm.
how you respond. I think that approach allows you to listen to your body and follow what's right for your body.
So you talked about a holistic approach, and you talked about um, this being the first layer, where, I would imagine that for most people, this is the go-to. It is the first
Right.
layer. It is the thing that you're like, well, let's look at what we're eating, because we do that multiple times a day. Some of us too many, not enough, what not right, all that sort of stuff. Um, and it's probably the best place to start, because it can undo everything we've been doing quickly if we don't watch it. But you talked about holistic, and you talked about how your wife had said some very key points of,
Yeah.
it's affecting us, how you're responding to, how you're talking about yourself, how you are responding to, to things around you. So as you peeled these layers back, what are some things that you started to reveal about, to see about yourself as the layers were being pulled off? Speak
Yeah.
to, any one of those where you're like, oh, here's the example. Here's what I started to realize, or how it affected that.
Yeah. For me, it was kind of a compounding thing that, like, once my body started feeling better, and I was fueling it in the right way, and I had energy that I had lacking, and I started sleeping better, all of that stuff. I started to think with a clearer head, and I
Mm,
started to be able to, like, be a little bit slower to let my emotions run me, or honestly, just be more patient in general with a 5 and a 1-year old, right? So
sure,
there's like,
sure. Yeah.
there's all of that stuff. But honestly, it maybe it's dumb to say it this way, but it kind of feels a little bit like I went through like some Mr. Miyagi training, where it
Okay.
was like,
Okay.
you wax on, you wax off, and then
Sure.
you're always like, Daniel, like, why am I doing this? What does this
Right.
matter? Like, this
Right.
physical motion doesn't do anything. I want to beat people up or whatever.
Yep.
Like, um, and it so when I was addressing my health, there was this approach that I went through, where anytime I was like struggling with trying to like stay focused on what
Mm,
my health goals were with just nutrition, with what I was putting in my body, there's this process of, you stop, you challenge like the situation, and then you
mm,
make a choice.
mm,
And so if it was like, man, I really want like a second bowl of ice cream or whatever it
mhm,
is,
mhm,
I would stop for a second and would ask myself, like, okay, do I want it? Do I need it? Like, what's the
Mm.
difference? Challenge the assumptions around, like, well, if I just want it, why is it that I want it? Like, is it because I need comfort from that? And
mm.
if I need comfort and I'm looking to that, maybe that thing has too much control over my
Yeah.
body,
Yeah.
right? Like, maybe it
Yeah.
has too much control over who I am.
Mm,
If it's literally just that, well, I just want it. Like, I don't need anything from it. I just want it.
right.
Then you can make a kind of an educated choice, right?
Yeah.
Of like, you know what? I don't have any weird strings attached to this emotionally, spiritually. I just want another bowl of ice cream. And
Sure.
then you make that choice, and you know what you're doing. You're not letting food control you.
Mm,
And it
Mhm.
started to get to a point, like, once I was thinking clearer, once I was able to like control my emotions a little bit more and honestly speak to and of myself in better ways, um, I started finding myself using that stop, challenge, choose method anytime I started to feel like I was losing control of my emotions, or
mm,
I was in a meeting with somebody who was just irritating me and I just wanted to jump out of my chair or whatever. I would stop what I was doing. I would challenge myself in this situation and say, like, why am I feeling this way?
mm.
What is it about what they're doing, what they're saying, that's making me angry? Is it because this or that? Is it because
Sure.
I've got some sort of emotional baggage around, or I've got a pride issue I'm dealing with and they're challenging it and I don't like that, right? And then through an educated process, make a choice of how I'm going to respond. And it's been huge in so many other areas of my life. So I
Mm,
really sort of see it as this kind of compounding thing. You
yep.
practice this process on the easy stuff, which in my case was the nutrition side. And then once I got into a rhythm of like coming up against tension, stopping, challenging, choosing it, then I started to see it happen in other areas of tension that I would experience in my life. And even in my relationship with God, when I think about like, you know, if I'm struggling with something, if I'm struggling with an element of guilt or shame or what God has gifted me with and trusting me, like, do I really deserve that or whatever it is, I stop myself, I challenge my thinking on it, and then I make a choice. And it's just been really, it's been really pivotal for me in all those areas.
Do you think that maybe you haven't even explored this yet or thought about it, but do you think about how the way that you used to view food as, and really like your approach to your health as like a limitation, right? Where you're like, yeah, okay, cool, that diet, this plan, this journey, whatever you called it, that's limiting me from enjoying life to its fullest. Do you think that there was a potential that you viewed your relationship with God in that same sort of lens where you were like, this whole like Christian life, he's kind of limiting me from enjoying all of the things of life and the way that I could be enjoying it and living in a way that is like the world might see as not reckless, but just like join in on the fun. But Christians would say that's reckless. You see what I'm getting at? Where you're like, maybe that didn't even cross your mind yet, and I'm just like opening that lens up. But that hit me. I was like, what if those two things were connected in a way where you were like, wow, I'm viewing God that way. Has that ever crossed your mind? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, so I love that you talk about it, man, and that'll preach, right? Like the idea of viewing our relationship with God, especially the things that we know can set us up to be healthy spiritually, physically, mentally, so like relationally, all of that stuff within our faith. We could view it as like restrictive, right? And it's all about what I'm not able to do, as opposed to thinking about like, what is this approach to our relationship with God, with our view of the world through God's eyes? How does that create all the things that now we are able to do, the things we're now able to see and able to be a part of because we're aware of it? We're outside of ourselves and just this like greedy pursuit of just getting things that's just for us or that we just want for ourselves, and imagining like there's something bigger. And that's what that invitation that God gives us is, that it's always about something bigger. It's turning the kingdom upside down, right? It's removing the boundaries and the barriers of what we had in place and what we got comfortable in, and challenging us to see where God's at work outside of him. Like that'll preach. Yeah.
Well, what comes to mind with this for me is every time we talk about this in the church, it's what, like your body's the temple, right? Like, and that's good. But like, how do you view a temple? And how do we view the behavior that should be in a temple is usually quiet, subdued, respectful. And it's like, man, that just sounds boring. I want to go do something with my body, right? And like, yeah, I think it's that same shift there too. It's almost like C.S. Lewis always talks about anything I just lost the quote. Essentially, paraphrased, it is the idea of everything has the same potential towards good, towards bad. Is it pointed at God or is it pointed at what you want? Is going to change how we do that. Of man, if what you're saying, I stop restricting thinking my temple needs to be this place of quiet, subdued, but rather, what can I do if I treat my body like a temple? What can I do for the furtherment of the gospel that I'm not able to do because of how I've been eating or sedentary lifestyle of just sitting around? I can't say words. I'm going to stop it. My brain's melting right now. I love this discussion. So
okay, so Jacob is super practical.
Yeah.
because in some ways we're talking about things in like, okay, in theory, you know, this is all great.
Yeah.
But for somebody who's like, okay, let's talk about the whole like developing my mental toughness, because that's what you talked about, where it takes a mental toughness to say, why do I want this?
Yeah.
Am I looking for something to fill a void? Like, do I need it? Do I want it? What do I do with it now? Real life example. There's many times throughout the day that I'm like, I just need like a little sugar. Like I feel like I need a sweetness of some sort.
Yeah.
And so I walk into the kitchen and I go, there's like a little box of like chocolate chips that are right there. And if I could just grab a couple morsels, I'm good. But
Right.
then there's like, but in the fridge, we keep grapes for this reason in some ways, because I'm like, but now I'll grab grapes and that'll feel a little bit better. You know, like maybe it's not fully what I'm looking for, but talk to us about that of like, if somebody's like, okay, how do I develop this mental toughness? What do I get going? Maybe talk to me like I'm looking for sugar.
Yeah.
What have you learned along the way that you're like, actually, this is actually what you need? What you want is this, but what you need is more water, you know, like, or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, some stuff that I've learned since I've been focusing on nutrition that totally different than what I've ever like learned growing up.
Sure.
Number one is like the path that I've gone down. There's lots of different paths.
Of course.
Lots of approaches.
Right.
The path that works for me and my body is really practical, kind of like anybody could follow it sort of thing. But like I eat 6 times a day, about every 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
And part of that is that our body, I can't.
You can't say our body, you mean your body. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Like if you're a trained health professional, you'll know like the official language around this stuff.
Right.
But what I know is that every 2 to 3 hours, I feel a sense of hunger. And I used to sort of approach food from like a starvation mentality, and that I would fight through that hunger. And then once I get to lunch, I'll eat this massive meal, or once I get to dinner, I'll eat this massive meal or whatever. And the reality is, our bodies are signaling to us all the time the stuff that we need. The challenge is that the way in which we're taught to respond and interpret those signals is more of a part of how we're nurtured and how we've grown up to be. So like growing up, again, my dad's breakfast was a Snickers. Anytime I was hungry, he would hand me a candy bar. So it was like, so my approach was always like, well, I mean, I need to eat something. Candy bar is fine, right? Like,
wow.
But the reality is like, if you pay attention to everything that goes into that food, then you start to sort of build a list of like, okay, if I'm going to eat 6 times a day, what do I need to put in those 6 like meals or 6 snacks that help me understand at the end of the day, I've got everything that I've given my body everything that it needs nutritionally. It's nutrient dense, right? And it's the right amount of protein. It's the right amount of carbs. It's the right amount of vegetables. Because the other side of that too is growing up, I always had like a super heavy starch, carb loaded like approach to my meals, because it would fill you up, right?
Sure, right.
So if I didn't have bread and butter, or if I was at a restaurant and didn't have tortillas and butter
in Texas, tortillas
yeah,
all the time, which are great.
Like if I didn't have that with everything, I was like, well, I'm missing something, right? But the reality is that our body needs very specific amounts of those foods. And anytime we go outside of that, we need to recognize that if we continue to go outside of that and build habits for it, it's going to have implications, not just physically on us, but the desire, the tastes that we seek after, the flavors that we want will change according to what we feed our bodies. So like if you over time just didn't have, chocolate in the house and you just had grapes, after a while that craving will start to shift, and you'll start to have this like craving that goes towards grapes, right? Or other options like it. And I see the same thing with like any sort of any sort of vegetable that growing up, I never ate.
Yep.
And then I
Yep.
started introducing, after a few weeks, my taste started to change, and it started to become something I would maybe not crave like a pizza, but at the same time, I wouldn't like stare at it and be like, okay, who's going to win today? Me or you, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I get that. I mean, I didn't grow up eating Brussels sprouts or
oh
zucchini
yeah,
or, any of those types of things. And now I've figured out a way to like prep it that I'm like,
right.
well, I've lost a lot of years where I
Yeah.
could have been having some good Brussels sprouts and some good zucchini, and now I'm like looking forward to having it. So that's
Yeah.
helpful. That's really good, because I think that in a lot of ways, like, we don't realize like there's a mental toughness that has to develop for us to get to a space where we can stop ourselves
Yeah.
as we're carrying our bodies towards something, and we're like, I'm ready to get that. Like, you're like,
Right.
hold on a second. What do we
Exactly.
need from that?
Yeah, and I mean, our brains and our bodies, they are intended to work together, but sometimes they have a hard time understanding each other. So like we'll have a craving for food, but our brain needs to do the detective work to figure out, okay, are you actually hungry right now, or are you thirsty? Right? Like, because our cravings for thirst and hunger feel the exact same in the body, and it's up to our brains to determine what's the right like
Yeah.
resource. So our body relies on our mental ability to determine the right things, when it signals to the brain, hey, you've got a craving, you need something right now.
That's good.
So what you're talking about with this idea of, a lot of that comes from the influences of how we were raised.
Right.
What came through with me was, we've all had that kid at camp, at youth group, run to the snack bar, blow all of the money that they had on candy bars immediately, right? And we know in the youth world that that's a red flag of nutrition at home, how things are going back on that home life. Yet we're not having the discussion of, what are we putting in our snack bars? If we have kids that are looking to us as spiritual leaders in their life, in their heart, and we're not taking care of them of, hey, what are we putting in our habits of what we teach them, beyond just spiritually, but to what they put in their body. And that, looking back for me, I had never thought that in my ministry time frame. Well, how would you approach that today?
Yeah.
In
I mean, for me personally, I always go back to, it's foods them like in and of themselves are not the enemy in this. However, we do have to make really intentional and smart choices with what we put in front of ourselves to make our decisions easier. And so many times we get caught up on like, well, I'm not drinking or smoking, so I can eat whatever or drink whatever, right? But the reality is, it's just as dangerous to just fuel yourself off of, as much as we all love spicy chicken sandwiches, to only eat spicy chicken sandwiches, right? Like, it's just as dangerous as the situation to our body if that's all that we put in, and if we put in too much of that. And I think, just like with a lot of our kids in our ministries, part of our role in their life is to help put the right choices in front of them, because when they're with us, they're in a safe environment where we can help provide a little bit of structure that they may not have anywhere else. And if we can do that and give them a safe process of discerning what's the right thing for them, while at the same time giving them options that set them up for success, then I think we're doing our jobs really well. And there's got to be that framework too around nutrition and what we put in our youth ministries.
That's really good. That's really good. Jacob, as we get ready to wrap up in this conversation, this has been awesome to hear from you and your story and your journey. And there isn't a time at all that I've heard you say like, here's the blanket way to do it. And so I think we're trying to be really aware of that, of everybody's on a different journey. And that's why we ask you to talk on yours and not anybody else's, because you can't speak on anybody else's. And health is something that can be maybe a taboo kind of subject for people to talk about, because it reveals a lot. And I I don't have any underlying health issues, so I haven't had a battle to face. And so I know that my circumstance is not everybody's circumstance. And I'm in a way that I go, okay, these are my struggles, but they're not as big as somebody else's. So we're not trying to even say like, well, this is all it is. Here's the silver bullet, sort of thing. So I appreciate that from you in that. One thing we also wanted to touch on, which is not health related, but it's all things new related. Your organization that you work with, YouthWorks.
Yeah.
Y'all are trying something new. You're doing something new. Can you touch on that? Kind of share as we wrap up here and do a little bit of a plug for what you're looking at for the summer and how you're setting up youth leaders for that.
Yeah, man. So YouthWorks, for anybody who doesn't know, we facilitate short-term mission trips for middle school and high school students, and we've been doing it for 26 years. And just like almost every other organization this last summer, with all of COVID happening, we made the really tough choice to cancel our trips, and that sent our team in this sort of like path of trying to imagine, how do we fulfill the mission that God's called us to, even if we're not in the picture? Which in some instances is actually a better fulfillment of the call of YouthWorks, right? Is to eventually not be in the picture. And so that sent us down a lot of different roads, but one of them is trying to equip churches to be able to serve locally without, and trying to remove as many barriers as possible that could keep them from doing that. And so on our website, youthworks.com/serve-local, we've bundled this 4-week curriculum that's free, that's geared towards helping develop a passion for service in your own community. And then there's a bunch of resources that are all about how to plan a day of service. So that the idea is, like, so many youth workers right now who are trying to imagine, what does camp look like in a pandemic, or just post-pandemic? What do we still need to be careful about? This kind of helps them dip their toe in the water of getting their students together to do something that's really critical for the discipleship of their faith, while also removing a lot of the like, well, but I've never planned a day of service before. Like, I don't know how to contact organizations, or I don't know how to build a meal plan for a week of service. Like, we just wanted to kind of peel back all the stuff that we do and gift it to as many churches as would want it. So on that website, at that link, you can download the free curriculum. There's everything in that curriculum that you would need, from like teaching guides. There's videos that if you want to just use the video teaching. There's a devotional. There's parent guides. There's all the stuff that you need. The resources for the day of service. It's the practical stuff, like how to figure out who to serve, as well as like, here's a schedule to follow. Here's a meal plan to work off of if you need it. And then there's a couple of other additional resources in there that just help you cast the vision for this in your ministry in a time when maybe your students and parents of your students are a little hesitant to get out and do this. We just want to help make it as possible as it can be.
Love it. Yeah, when you sent that stuff my way and I get to look through it, it's incredible. It's so good. And much like what you were talking about with, your health journey, where you were going on it and you were like, I just need something to kind of walk me through what I'm supposed to put in my body, what I'm not supposed to put in my body. This is a way that your organization is able to relieve some of that stress, so then you can be fully in the moment and fully present with students. Because I think, man, there's so many things. I mean, as you just talked about, it's like, oh man, that's a lot. And as somebody who leads a mission trip, like, I couldn't imagine just starting from scratch and going, what are we supposed to do now? Like, something that was starting brand new. And definitely love the local to be able to serve our neighbors and the people down the street. That's super cool. So thanks for that. Thanks to your team for developing that. And we're excited to hear the stories that come from that. Jacob, thanks for joining us. How can people connect with you if they've heard something and they're like, I have questions, I've got comments, or I just have more things to share with him about my journey, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the best way, honestly, is email. So if you just want to shoot me an email, jacob.eckeberger@youthworks.com. I'd love to chat. And it doesn't have to be about health. It doesn't have to be about mission trips. It could just be about, if you just want to, you just want to connect. It's one of my favorite parts about what I get to do. So I'd love to do that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Jacob, we'll drop that as well in the notes so people can find that easily. Thank you so much for being with us today. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, y'all.
Well, that was a great time with Jacob. That conversation was fascinating to me. I really enjoyed our time together as we talked about our prioritizing our physical health. This is an area that it takes work. It's a journey. It is one that one size does not fit all. And the experiences and that were shared here are not your experience. They're not anybody else's. They're only ours. And I hope that as you've listened to this conversation, that you heard from us personally, that we're not trying to say this is how you do it. Just simply, this is how we have gotten to where we are. And our physical health is important because as Jacob shared, it is something that it has a trickle effect. It has one that impacts, it permeates through many different areas of our life. And there's seasons too. There are some of us, we're coming out of winter. We live in a place in the country where we're holed up and we're limited by the weather. And so we've had to get really creative on how we stayed active and could prioritize those things. So if you're listening along the way, if you've been watching with us on YouTube, I just want to say that, like, you're not alone in this journey. All of us are doing something a little bit different, but we're all trying to be our best and be our best ultimately for our families and for our students and for the leaders that look up to us in our organizations, in our context, the volunteers that we serve with, wherever we're at in our communities. We want to be with you. And so if you heard something and you're feeling alone, we're with you. Reach out to us. In fact, there's ways for people, for you to find other people in your community. If you're unaware, our website, NNYM.org, we have a place where you can search for a community near you and find other youth leaders that would love to be in relationship with you, in a community with you, and walk with you in whatever you're doing. So go check that out. Also, make sure to check out YouthWorks. They've got a really incredible list of things that they offer in summer mission trips, and as they've shared some new resources that they have made available. Find all those links in the description for this show. We'd love to get you connected with other people that can help serve you well and serve your community well. But thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with us in this space, in this time. Look out for other episodes in regards to this topic, because we have got another one coming up ready for you later this month. And until next time, peace, blessings.